So the Nidcha, the summary that we need to know now on these bases that Gan Eden Elyon is the Yichud of Chachma Bina, Gan Eden Tachten of Chachma of Zoh, the Midas and Malchus. Now he says that this is the critical part, which we're learning correctly. That is Yoshvin V'Nanin Miziv Ashchina. That's all, rather Miziv Teirosin V'Avidosa. From the ray of the Torah and Avodah. That's Gan Eden Elyon and Gan Eden Tachten as they are manifested by Hashem. But then there's Avodah. Then there's La'avdal L'Shomra, the actual Torah and Avodah itself, and that's Mamshech Tois V'S'or. The Tois V'S'or identified means Hashem's Rotzen. That's the Kodesh. That's the Yechida level that is unlocked, therefore, by Avodah. So the Mamshech, Yidna Mamshech in Shem Havaya, which means Gan Eden Elyon, Gan Eden Tachten, because now I've explained the combination of the two spans all the 10 spheres. So Yid is Mamshech, high in Shem Havaya, Borcha is Havaya, so Yedechem Kodesh, or Borcha is Havaya, so Kodesh is Keser, Yechida, and be Mamshech in Shem Havaya, that which is Bemes beyond Ishtalshalus, and again it's the Rotzen Hashem. God's pure desire, the Pnimius of it all. B'chinas HaKeser, B'chinas HaYechid. Okay, now continuing in this Gimel, yeah? All right, I can't lose on the Yes, the Kasha is Gam, B'mamavu, look at the Torah, B'sei Parsha Seino, Parsha's Bolog, in the Torah at the end, the Alter Rebbe says, B'negei L'yin HaTshuva, with respect to Tshuva, we thought we had some time, We're just barely approaching of. There's no time. The Rebbe is launching us right into Tshuva here, and just glancing ahead, talks about Aseret Tshuva. We'll see. Okay. There's a sale on Tshuva. We can chaparine early. We're getting a bargain. So there's two darges in Tshuva, Tshuva Tatov and Tshuva Ilo, as we're speaking about Gan Eden Tachten, Gan Eden Elyon, so to the lower Tshuva, the higher Tshuva. Even though in detail, obviously, there are endless madreges, that also endless madreges. Anybody remembers the quote that he always quotes in saying that there are endless Gan Eden, endless madreges in Gan Eden. Sela, and Sela means forever. So the Kodesh Mother Neshamas, and that's Gan Eden, and that's endless. That's true, B'chlal, but in general, two distinctions. So B'chol Echad Mehem Yesh Beis Madreges. Now he adds that in each of the two levels of Tshuva, there are two levels. What's that? Tshuva or Baal Tshuva? What does that mean? In Pashtus, Teshuva and Baal Teshuva, I mean, obviously there cannot be Tshuva without the one who does Tshuva. But at the risk of simplifying it, and I don't know what's coming further, but in general, Teshuva addresses one's behavior, and Baal Tshuva addresses the person. That's obviously very different. One can devote oneself behaviorally and still reserve the self for self. And then this Baal Tshuva that gives himself over. That's B'chalalas L'cha'ira. Let's see what the Maimon says. So there's two levels of Tshuva. And Baal Tshuva, Derech Shebachol, so Gan Eden Tachten, just like he pointed out, that in each category of Gan Eden, there's also two levels. Gan and Eden. So Gan will correspond to Tshuva and Eden to the Baal Tshuva. Eden is the source, you recall, right? Either it's pure Chochmah or it's Chochmah of Zoh. Now, in detail, the proti is hine tshuva tato. Yeah, he says now. Yeah, tshuva tato b'malchus. The lowest tshuva is malchus. Again, this is all based on the Zohar. Geras tshuva, which we're learning now, is based on the Zohar. That the Zohar says that the tshuva makes up two words, toshuv hey, and the Zohar goes on to say there's two levels, because it's referring to the higher hey and the lower hey of Shem Havaya. So the lower hey of Shem Havaya, of course, corresponds to Malchus. So Tshuva Tato is Malchus, that means behavioral. What's Malchus? Malchus generally is Machshava de B'Lemaisa, behavior. So Tshuva Tato is correcting behavior. Baal Tshuva Tato, and the master, the one that does Tshuva of the lower level, he's not just correcting his behavior, but he's changing to some degree the way he feels, his very desires, and so on. That's all the two categories within Tshuva Tato. Tshuva Ilo is Bebina. So Tshuva Ilo is Bina. That's the lower level within the higher level. Ubal Tshuva Ilo b'Chochma. So what does that mean? Similarly, Bina means I understand. So it's still about the self to some degree. And Baal Tshuva is b'Chochma. It's not about to understand. It's the truth illuminates. Right? The Chochma experience is bittul. The Bin experience is I'm understanding it. And Chochma is I see the truth. The truth shines. So that's transformative, transcending of self. And that is Baal Tshuva. Now, I'm telling you this whole adichas of the what does Tshuva Ilo mean? Tshuva is obvious. You've got to change our behavior. Our behavior has been cut off in the wrong place, so we've got to reconnect it. That's Tshuva Tato. What's Tshuva Ilo? Tshuva Ilo is in Kedusha Gufa, learning with greater and greater sense of bittul and awareness of Hashem, and less taken, absorbed, and focused on one's self and one's understanding, one's experience. That's Tshuva Ilo. In Kedusha Gufa, going from Teshuvah to the Baal Tshuva, to use the words of our Maimer. So it means a person can do Tshuva, but he's not a Baal Tshuva. He did Tshuva. He did, but he still isn't changed. And Baal Tshuva is these two levels of change, of internal change. Now, continuing, so these are the 4 levels of Tshuva. 2 categories, 4 levels, just like Gan Eden. Okemarum is B'Lekot Torah, Shom, like hinted there in the Kot Torah. Yeah, Shadal Madreges Hanal, the 4 levels of Tshuva, Keneged Dalet Isha Shem Havaya, correspond to the 4 levels of Shem Havaya, and that's what we're talking about over here too. Gan Eden, the Yedechem, and the Vavke. Yeah, we're clear, folks. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Ach Yeshnoi Oid Inyan B'Tshuva. There's a 5th, sorry. Another Inyan in Tshuva, Shehi Etzem B'chinas HaTshuva Mitzad Atzmo. That's the Etzem Inyan of Tshuva. Shelamayli Mikol Daled Oisias. Higher than all the 4 letters. Koil Games HaYud. Even the Yud, which is Bittul. So Gewalt, what is this? Hine Inyan HaTshuva. This is all going to drive to the level of Keser, right? Kodesh Elyon. So Yedechem Kodesh, Yechida. That's where we're going here. Because let's look at what Tshuva is. Inyan HaTshuva is Sake, and it's called Masha Nechsa Bekimater Mitzvahs. But that's Tshuva basically is to fix, to rectify that which is lacking in the fulfillment of Torah Mitzvahs. Now, Kivin Torah Mitzvahs say Medal Shem Havaya. Torah Mitzvahs are all expressed in the Dalet Oishis of Shem Havaya. Basically, Yudke is Torah and Vavke is Mitzvahs. So therefore, Tshuva needs to address both Shem Havaya and beyond it. Tshuva has to be Heina in Yon Vidal Hashem Havaya. Obviously, Tshuva has to address the failings that are expressed in the four ACS in learning Torah and Kima Mitzvahs. Shem Saktim Al Yoda, that he's fixing it through his Tshuva. But he's got to go beyond, because Vein in Yerushalayim, he's got to go beyond holding of Torah and Mitzvahs, the holding of Hashem Havaya, because you're going to fix something. You got to draw in a place that's high, a pure place. That's he's got to draw beyond there in order to be able to fix Taka. The Dalet Hashem Havaya. So you got to be within that world, but to fix it, you've got to connect to a higher place. And this is what we're talking about. That's the Kodesh Elyon, that's the Yid of Keser. And in Avodah, I didn't learn the whole Maimon, so it's going to be translated, but just so far as we understand that Keser, of course, means Rotzen, so that means Rotzen, which is will, what do you want in life, which drives everything. That's where he's got the tshuva has to. That's the Baal Tshuva, even higher than Baal Tshuva. Etzemina Tshuva, that's where it has to originate in God's desire, and therefore, what do I want? And what I want completely defines everything I'm going to express as a result of that. That'll fix Seichel, Midas, everything. That's even beyond Baal Tshuva. Because Baal Tshuva is still dealing with consciousness, intellect, emotion, and changing, refining emotions, learning with greater bittul. This is more than that. This is the simple question of, who are you? What do you want? What do you really want? And he's a Yid. He wants to be connected to the Eibishter, and he wants the Eibishter to have Nidcha. So that's what he unlocks. That's the Yechida. And that's how he's able to fix Bemes and truly all of the failings at the Yudke Vavke level. Okay, let's continue. Yeah, now we're zeroing in, elaborating what we just talked about now. In light of what we said before in Sif Aleph, there is a level of Keser, as it's hinted to in the stroke on top of the Yud, in brackets. On one hand, it's higher within the Yud, which is Chacham Kalmokim. It's not something independent to Chachma. It's hinted to in the Yud. So that's one level of Keser. The will, as it's subordinate to the conscious faculties. Then it's a pure will. Then is the darga of Keser, as it stands alone, the pure will, unfiltered by any intellectual appreciation or value or agenda. So in light of what we said, we just said now, therefore, yesh levaya, we can explain, this is the difference, these two levels of tshuva. The Rotzen, both draw on the Rotzen, but there's the Rotzen, the Helem, the true tshuva will draw on higher than Shem Havaya, that be the Kodesh Yod, that's general. And then there's it goes to say, I says to me tshuva, which the Rotzen Bagoli. Isn't it quite interesting that, this is Shivasa Tmuz, and the mistake is right to say to me tshuva. Sure. We're happy to go. So the Avodah says, so this is between the yin and the Avodah says to make tshuva. Shbechol Ashana, year round Avodah begilui, the conscious Avodah is bedalit Hashem Havaya. The conscious Avodah is working on mind and heart and behavior. Of course, it all comes, it draws its inspiration for what I want, but it's behelim and it's incorporated. The keser is present, but nichlal, part of the word not sub, no, what's the word? Subsumed. What? Subsumed. No. I mean, something that's like, You once told me the word, I can't forget it. Okay, we get the point. Subservient means, it's engaged in some kind of service. Submused.
Subsumed.
Subsumed. That's the word. Subsumed. So Keser is nichla, subsumed, bedal doisies. Now in brackets, bedugma sa'avoid b'chol ma'itcha. But it's all relative. There's avoid b'chol ma'itcha, which b'chol means beyond limits. That's got to be year round. Shesichli is gam b'chol hashon. But it's not the emphasis. It's walking your, Mesidas Nefesh, but Golui, that's not the Avodah. The Avodah is engagement. He's ready to give up his life. He's not in a state of giving up his life year round. It's got to be the foundation. But that's not Mashenkin, that's year round. That's Kaitzer Shal Yud. That's Keser, that it's present within consciousness, the underpinning of consciousness. And then is a sense of tshuva she'oz meir begilui b'chinas hayichida. Sense of tshuva starting with Rosh Hashanah, culminating Yom Kippur. So that's when the level of yichida is revealed. Yeah, it's hinted to in the Gemara. Kan barabim, kan b'tzibur, kan b'yochid. Just to remind you, the Gemara says points out the contradiction that the one that it says that Hashem is close, b'chol kareinu elav, whenever we call him. Then the pasuk says, Dirish Hashem b'motzei, seek God when he's found. Which implies it's not always accessible. Then there's a pasuk Kodesh Hashem l'chol kodesh. Hashem is near to all who call upon him. So the Gemara answers that one is talking about can't be yachid, can't be tzibur. When you daven with the tzibur, then Hashem is always accessible. And with b'yachid, then you've got to call upon him when he's accessible. When is that? That's a sesame tshuva. So it's a nigla hint very strongly that sesame tshuva is the yachid is revealed. That's yichida. So sesame tshuva she'oz mei begil b'chinas hayichida v'ilo daltit shemavaya. And so in sesame tshuva, the dalad oisius, which is consciousness and seichel and understanding and so on, shekaneged eses vidis, which correspond to the eses vidis, and they're present to connect them. Him gam sesame tshuva. I said the 10 days of tshuva correspond to also the 10 levels of consciousness which correspond to the dalad oisius. But still, what dominates, what is revealed, and what is stirred, starting with Kiyah Shofar, Rosh Hashanah, is yichida. Now, in that period, there is a yeshchiluk. Amazing. Okay, yeshchiluk b'asesem tshuva atzmo, and in asesem tshuva itself, there's a difference between Hashanah Yom Kippur and Mashal Yomim. Hashanah Yom Kippur, gufa in asesem tshuva gila yechida is even greater, and that's hinted. Kvish mashma b'loshen Chazal, as implied by the terminology of Chazal, which seems to be contradictory, because the Lashon is Elo, when is Hashem found, when is he near? These are the 10 days, Shebein, Rosh Hashanah, the Yom Kippurim. It's not 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, there's 7 days. So to reconcile that, explains, there's a taka level, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, where it's equal to the 7 days in between. The SS is part of the system, but then there's another level. Rosh Kippur puts it outside of the Asara Yomim. Keser, pure Yechid. That's what he's saying now. On the one hand, the 10 darosh Tshuva include Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. On the other hand, Bain, the Asara Yom of Tshuva are in between them because Yesh Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur in Atzmai. Rosh Hashanah Kippur have the independent, because that's pure within Yechida Gufa, it's mamish, pure Yechida. Shalamaydim Ases Mitshuva higher than the Ases Mitshuva, the Ases Svidas, the Ases Keichas HaNefesh, higher than consciousness. And he sees, footnote 29, sends us Lakot Sichas Chelik Dalet. Klal Chelik Dalet, and all the first Chalakim, especially Chelik Dalet, are very Yesoides Dik. Should be learned. Vahaino, it's in Chelik Dalet, that's the long Ha'ara started, and the Sichas they started to prepare them more complicated ones, more complex ones. Just to remind you, the whole Kodesh Sichas was created at the request of Chassidim. A big part of this was Ben Shem Tov and Label Raskin. The Rebbe demanded that the Chassidim should chaz Chassidus in the Shul. So in the very early days, they would chaz whatever, look at the Torah, whatever they chazed. So they started to ask the Rebbe that the Rebbe should edit his sichas. They want to chaz his sichas. The Rebbe first said he didn't have time for it, but then eventually he did. And at home somewhere in Australia, imagine I got it over there. It used to come out in a mimeographed form. You may remember it with a green paper cover, typed mimeographed, ran off on the Gestetner machine. So the Rebbe's Magia, those sichas for the Chazorah in the Shul. So what they chose and what they wrote up and submitted for the Rebbe's editing, and the early years also are very, very basic, but simpler. Externally simpler. It's Chilik Aleph. It's Chilik Aleph. And then already in Beis, but in Gimel and Daled already started more complex sichas, and Rebbe added copious footnotes, and then Kodesh Sichas took off with its ups and downs. At times I was not happy at all with the way they were being written up, and it was suspended for a while, and then it was brought back. It went from Yiddish to Hebrew. They wanted to make it Lashon Kodesh, it would be more universal for Lomdim. Never didn't like the way it was done. They went back to Yiddish and then eventually back to Hebrew again. Whole history, as you may have read it, I think probably Nidha wrote up, must have written it up, the history of Lakot Sichas, I'm sure it did. Certainly on the YouTube, the Leibel Shapiro and Nachman Shapiro, all these people. Why am I saying that? Because he's saying Yechelik Daled, very foundational, that explains the inyan of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and Ases Mitshuva. So all to say, concluding, V'haino shebchinas ha'yechida gufa. So in Yechida itself, in Ases Mitshuva, he'imchinas koitzer shel yud. That would be koitzer shel yud, still tethered, bound to Chachma. Shezeh kafi shebchinas ha'keser. Kolol Bais Yud, that's Keser Taket Yechida, but it's all incorporated within Ais Yud. Vil Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it's all relative. In Asayes Mitshuva, which is Bachal Kan B'Yochid, Shnikra Gam Ken Hashanah B'Kosev. Yom Kippur is also called in the Pasuk in the Cheskel. It's also called Rosh Hashanah, which implies that Yom Kippur is the realization, the full gilui of the Kodesh HaYechida, which is the Kodesh of Tkiyah Shofar of Rosh Hashanah. So what's Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? When you begin to say Yechida, Kefish B'fnei Atza B'gilui, it's the pure I'm a Yid, Mamash Yechida in its purest, essential way. Yeah. Yedechem. Is Daled, Zeo. This is what the pasuk is saying. This is the mind of the Yedechem Rebbe. I'm just suggesting that the Rebbe stressed at the beginning of the mind, but you recall, he said that this Maimer, Yedechem Kodesh, was said the first Shabbos after Yud Beis Tmuz, when Bizman of Raive Deraive, which is a taste of Yom Kippur, which is what he's talking about here. I'm just saying, maybe that's why, Chas v'shalom, to say that's the reason, but I'm just pointing out the connection with the theme of the Rebbe is developing here, which is Yechida, Raivin, the Raivin. Chal Raivin is Chaya. The Raivin, the Raivin is Yechida. So, Yedechem Kodesh Baruch Havaya. So, a Yid reaches the level of Kodesh. Not enough the mind will explain why it's Yedechem. Well, Yedechem, of course, your hands go in the midas. Right hand, left hand, chesed gevurah. The shirish of the midas is deeper than seichel. It's mushish and etzema nefesh.
Yeah, it looks like the Rebbe's.
Do Yedechem,
It looks like the Rebbe's going to touch on Yedechem.
In a few lines, it says the Rebbe addresses it specifically.
Okay. I didn't learn next. Let's see what he says. Oh, Maise. Okay. At the end of the Maimon already. I didn't realize. Almost. Yedechem Kodesh Baruch Havaya shekadei sheyimshach teisvus b'shem Havaya. In order to be mamshich in Shem Havaya, which is where you'd give the holy shtalshalos, including the Kodesh Yud, shezeh Baruch Havaya. That Baruch means you're mamshich. So ich like here beginnes hakeser, beginnes hayichida. So we have to draw on the pure, unadulterated keser yichida. That's the dag of Kodesh. As we pointed out, Bem Gufa, he says Metshuva, which there Bachalal Kesed is like Kodesh Shal Yud. Bem Gufa, that's not enough either. It's got to be the way it's shown in Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim, the union of Kesed Bagolui. So how is that effective? In Nasa they avoided the so Yedechem Kodesh. Yedechem, your hands, Daike, Shezel, Inyan Amaisa. So that's the paradox. It's dafka through Maisa. The dasa the shaila is, but the whole point is that no, that's the lower level. That's the lowest level of tshuva. It's the lowest level in the lower level. No, the lower level of tshuva is the lower hay, which deals with Maisa, and that's what we're fixing. You say no, implying that this lowest level is mamshich. The Darga of Kodesh. This is addressed, maybe we'll see here, but it's addressed in other places. We'll see. So what do you say now? Where's action in the hands? What about the feet? The feet, the legs also have but that's not a uniquely human thing. Behema can walk too. And run and jump. You don't see in the raglayim the mile of a person. Where do you see it in his hands? We want to see in his action, he's not just a brute, but we see that he's an adam. We want to see in his action refinement. The Lashon Chazal, Gemara Chulin, to look this up. Adam shein arumin bedas, people that are naked, as it were, bereft of knowledge, and place themselves like a behema. Looks like it's based on a pasuk. Even when they are like a behema, which means at the action level, arumim actually means, arumim, no, not naked, no, it means guile, clever. The adam arumim bedas, on the contrary, they're clever, and place themselves like a behemoth. It sounds like, they look externally to be a behemoth, but they're really full of guile. So the deeper meaning is that even at the level of behemoth, which is Maisa, so at least Nikashim Arumim, that they are clever. The Nachash is described as Arab, cunning. cunning, bedas, guile. Okay, so if the mamshech, the Indian, within our actions, it has to be not just action, but in the words of the Maimed, nikir mailus adam. Okay, so we have to see the hasbara vinya bezeh. The Chayr is going to explain how is it through Ma'aseh. We're talking about Yechid, even higher than Baal Tshuva, and he's saying that's affected through Yedechem Kodesh. That's what he's going to explain now. Looks in the next ice. Okay, that will begin Be'ez Hashem tomorrow.